Hello and welcome to Strip Panel Naked. I'm Hass and I'm going to show you some of the cool stuff lurking in the pages of some of the best comics. Comics are a silent medium, and so to convey sound, writers, artists and letterers have only a couple of options. You have the sound effect, the caption box, or the speech bubble. Each of those has various different forms. The sound effect is part of the panel or the thought bubble rather than the speech bubble, but they mostly fall into those categories. The speech bubble itself is a very powerful thing, and that can often be overlooked. There's a lot you can do to manipulate and play around with a speech bubble. As an audience, when we see a bubble, we understand the simple transaction from page to us as a reader. This character, who the tail points to, is saying the words inside the bubble. There's a specific example I wanted to use to talk about the power you have with a speech bubble, and no other medium apart from comics allows you this flexibility. What I wanted to look at is Sandman. Neil Gaiman and Todd Klein decided to make 3 very simple changes to Dream's speech bubble that the standard ones and the rest of the comic didn't have. So here's a normal speech bubble, and here's Dream's bubble. So the 3 changes are pretty evident. They reversed the colours to be black background with white text, they loosened the borders of the panel to make it more squiggly, and they made his dialogue lowercase. 3 very, very simple changes, but they make an immediate and striking effect on any page in which Dream speaks. It stands apart. Dream is visibly different, and so adding this further visual identifier in that speech bubble really helps tell there's something not normal about him. When we exist in a world where everyone speaks like this, it seems odd that we have this character. He doesn't exist in the same reality that these other characters do. While some other characters in Sandman, who are known as the Endless, who are essentially gods, have sometimes got different bubbles, such as these, but all of them have uppercase dialogue, and I couldn't find another example of lowercase dialogue in Sandman, and that's clearly by design. So Dream is basically the god of the dreamland. He rules the dream world, and the watery nature of the edges of his speech bubble seem to give off that impression as well in his speech. It's kind of indefinable. Maybe his voice fluctuates, it's not as solid, maybe it changes octaves as he speaks. Maybe you just hear the voice inside your head, similar to, say, a thought bubble in another comic. They both have these kind of non-defined edges. The lowercase of the letters would indicate softness to me. We often see capitals as shouting, but lowercase as a quieter type of speech, more reflective. And the black background with white font, that's reversed from normal, so would lend itself to a voice that sounds wrong. All this builds up a character removed from everything else around him. And thematically, that's a very, very big part of the character of Dream in this comic and story. He's often quantified as the loner, and the speech here goes a huge way to show that this might even be a case of his very nature ostracizing him. He's not choosing to be different, he just is different. But the main thing to understand from this is that this is entirely my interpretation, my version based solely on how I consider the bubble to be working. By adapting the speech bubble for Dream, you're asking the reader to interpret what that means to them without actually having to tell them. In a novel, you have to describe everything that's important, or the audience won't read it, they won't know it, therefore putting it at the forefront of their mind. In cinema, you've got an even harder job, because you've actually got to reproduce that sound and you leave nothing to the imagination.
Well, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark.
And in comics, with speech bubbles, it's obvious to a reader, but because you aren't specifically drawing attention to it, you just leave it as part of the way the world in the comic book works. And you ask your audience to use imagination. And that's the simple genius of it, because by doing this, Klein and Gaiman ask you to think about how this sounds. And when you can get your audience to engage in world building with you like that, you've captured them and their imagination, and that's one of the most powerful tools as a storyteller, and this sinks into their understanding of the character dramatically. In storytelling, the phrase suspension of disbelief often pops up. What suspension of disbelief means is asking your audience to suspend the fact that they know what's happening in the pages of the story is not reality. And if you can get them to buy into the world making with you, to imagine that place in their head, that goes a long way to suspending that disbelief. It makes these stories more personal and more interactive because you're being asked to decipher and build something yourself. And I know when I remember stories about Dream and Sandman, his speech bubble is a big part of what I remember, in the same way that I see Dr. Manhattan's speech bubbles as blue, as Swamp Thing's bubbles as orange. It's as part of the character as Sam Keith's artwork and the original designs are. The reason why Sandman is a successful comic is because of its storytelling. This is built up majorly through characterization of its leads and of its world. It's why you have a standalone issue about Dream and Shakespeare that exists only to build more mythology to the world and the character of Dream, and have it be one of the strongest individual issues of a comic told in this medium. And the reason they can build this world is because all the elements come together. And though lettering work can sometimes seem like just figuring out where to place a speech bubble in a frame, here Todd Klein and Neil Gaiman show that actually it's just as important an element in world building and storytelling as any other part of the comic. Next time you're reading something and you notice that a speech bubble is different or laid out differently, take a look and try to figure out why. Notice that they're doing something more than just offering you some regular speech from a character in the comic book. Great storytellers, and great letterers importantly, know how to play around with this. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying Strip Panel Naked and the videos, you might want to check out our Patreon, where we offer reading lists, additional analysis, and full comic breakdowns that go along with each video topic. You can find it at patreon.com/strippanelnaked. Thanks.